before the break that there's a new scam hitting the shore of Hawaii and it's concerning, and it's going to lead to a discussion with Beth Fukumoto in a minute about that. But first of all, there's this big increase in scams and frauds, and I want you to listen to this only because it sometimes gets to a point where you almost have to legislate about it. We'll talk about that and how things get legislative. But I promise you, just before that, here is Paula O'Connell and Pete Gagliano on these new concerns and these scams. It just might be causing you to get a big puka in your wallet. Here they are.
Scammers are upping their game. They know Hawaii is getting better at spotting the same old schemes. As KITV4's Pete Gagliano shows us, they're finding new ways to separate you from your money.
That's right. These schemes are becoming more creative and more complex. We talked to experts to find out what you need to know, young or old, to avoid losing your money.
And unfortunately, we're seeing a tsunami of crimes happening in Hawaii, especially those targeting seniors.
Scott Spallina would know his office has prosecuted about 5 times as many cases in the past year as it did in 2008. The scams change with the times. Case in point, the so-called Microsoft scam.
Calling you, saying that they're going to help you fix your computer, and then what they do is they get you to give them an access to your hard drive, and they load a virus onto it, and then they charge you to remove it while stealing all your confidential information.
Some crooks still rely on one of their greatest hits, the sweepstakes scam. You're a winner after you pay the money up front.
And one of the things that we try to tell them is you should never have to pay a fee if you've actually won something, because con artists will say, oh, you've won, you just need to send us the money for the taxes.
Here at the Ala Moana Hotel, individuals learning tips to prevent them from becoming victims of scams. Ann Albert never thought she'd be a victim until PayPal informed her her account had been compromised.
Somebody opened up a $1,800 line of credit in your name. They got your, they knew your birth date, last 4 numbers of your social security number, and they've charged you $500 doing that.
Experts preach the essentials. Don't give out personal info. If you don't recognize the phone number calling, don't answer it. Many of these schemes start with a phone call. Research who you're investing with at smartcheck.gov, and don't fall for this one either.
We hear a lot about this so-called grandparent scam here, where people are calling up and saying, hi, Grandpa, and the grandfather will put a name out there. Oh, is this you, John? Yeah, it's me, John. I'm in jail, and I need your help, but please don't tell Mom. Could you wire me $2,000?
Coming up with new ones all the time. Another tip since tax season has just passed. Remember, the IRS will never call you saying you owe money. They will always correspond using U.S. mail.
Yeah, so what happens is when these things really boil over, then it comes to the attention of lawmakers. And I guess if there's not a specific law that covers a specific thing, in this day of everybody getting plenty of attorneys, then we got to go make it a law. And I'm not quite sure that that's not pretty accurate, and we're going to find that out because we say good morning on a very busy week coming up for the Hawaii legislature. It is put the rubber to the road, put the metal to the metal. But isn't it sort of true? Good morning, Beth.
Good morning.
Beth Fukumoto in the house. I only played that bit because I promised people I was going to do it, and I think it's important to understand that every now and again there are really smart scammers that come up with something that isn't exactly covered by a law. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then it gets called to somebody's attention, and therefore we roll forward. Does this sometimes create a reason why you think, why? We had laws for all of that. Why do we have to make new ones?
Yes. A lot of times it's a lack of enforcement of the laws. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, especially with internet scams, it's actually just hard to catch the people that are doing it. I
got to tell you, one of our favorite new programs is this CSI Cyber, because they're on it. You know, there are things happening, and I think that, you know, our seniors are at the highest risk, right? Because they're the most novice at the internet.
Yeah, and one of the things that we at the legislature have tried to focus on is education for seniors, and to protect them from scammers, because a lot of people my age know don't click on things. You just know automatically don't click on any links. It's from somebody you don't know. But seniors tend not to do that. I mean, I talk to my dad about it all the time.
How often do you, like me, get the email saying, oh, you know what, from so-and-so, your mailbox is full. And we need to fix this right away. Otherwise, you will not get email.
Right. Or help you clean up your email or whatever.
Yeah. And clickety click. Okay. So anyway, that explains a little bit of it. And I guess that laws have got to be made for new technology because they weren't covered in the old.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's get down to the nitty gritty. Couple things that are really of concern, and maybe first of all, you can preface things by telling people that it really is crunch time. I mean, we're to the point where are we?
So, in theory, all the bills should have passed out of committee. We might have one more. I'm sure we'll talk about that, medical marijuana dispensaries. But for the most part, everything has passed out of committee, and now we're just looking at final votes, which means it goes in front of both houses.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, and that being said, if it's up, it goes to the desk of the governor. If it's down, it goes away.
It goes away. If it goes away for the session because we're in the first year of a biennium.
Yep.
It can come back next year.
Okay. Now that being said, somebody asked a really good question. Normally I don't take these off the air, but this is non-political. What if the governor, or in the case of a city, in the city council, what if the mayor? But in the case of the state, what if the governor knows that this certain bill didn't make it, but he still wants it? Can he revive it?
He doesn't have the power to revive it, but what has happened, for example, Senate Bill 1075, privatization of Maui Memorial Hospital.
Okay.
The governor hadn't said a whole lot to us for the entire legislative session, and last week asked us to hold a specific bill because he didn't like what was in it, and wanted it to go to conference for us to change.
Can that be, to explain, I think you've explained this before, but in anticipation, because maybe the concept he liked, but the language he didn't, or vice versa?
Right, there were issues with it that he felt like that wasn't the best way to do it, and rather than, veto it or something like that, he stepped in to say, hey, can you guys change up this language and make it better? Also,
there's one happening in the nation's capital right now that as a rider would abolish affordable care. So that's sticking out like a sore thumb, saying, hey, this bill's no good with that in it.
Right.
Get that out of there and we'll talk about it.
Right.
So that's similar?
Similar, yes.
Okay, let's get down to some specifics, because I do know that if there ever was a time that somebody's input is important, it's right now. We do this, the whole session sort of boils down to this, okay, now it's voted on.
Right. So if you contact your representative on Wednesday,
yep,
we're still in the legislative session, but they probably will have already taken their votes.
Right.
Yeah.
So it really means that today and tomorrow, is there a way that you can go online and see what bills? I mean, it's easy, right?
Yeah. So capital.hawaii.gov, there's a list of the bills that we're voting on. You have to click through and find the lists, but there's a list. And it would have to be today, really. We're going to be on this. Yep. We're going to be on the floor voting from 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
I'm not going to say that there would be any, 1 or 2, 3 responses going to make anybody change their mind. But if it was a really organized effort, it at least is going to get looked at, right?
Yeah.
Isn't your staff pouring through stuff to show you on these kind of things?
Right. And one of the things that I asked them is to always make sure before 9 a.m. tomorrow that I've seen everything about every single bill that anybody sent me. After that, no guarantees.
Yeah, it's too late. Okay, we got more coming up, including your opportunity to join the party. Speaking about that, Beth Fukumoto is here from the Republican Party, the minority in the House, as we get things done. And once they get done, they're done. And today and tomorrow, that's it. Just like in traffic. Here's get things done. Here's Malin Moore, signed hopeful, right? A lot of us say, hey, look, we go to the polls and we vote, and we elect people to do our thinking for us. And the people that we elect are thinking, what are my voters thinking? Because my opinion is good, but so is theirs. So therein lies the difficult spot we're in this morning. Beth Fukumoto Chang is here. We're talking about this today and tomorrow being really the last opportunity most of us non-elected officials have to voice our opinion. And once again, Beth, I think it's important for people to know the mandate of, if you will, that you all have to pay attention to what we say.
Yes.
How does it work? I mean, obviously there are some times when somebody votes against what their constituency might want, and what happens is they'll get elected next time.
In a perfect world.
Yeah, in a perfect world. But then there's some that say, well, you know what, it doesn't matter because we're just like sheep. We just keep doing the same things over and over again, expecting another result.
Right. I think for me, I like to hear back from my constituents. I understand that they're not in the building and they maybe don't have all the nuances that I have, having sat through lots of hearings about these bills, but it's really important to know where they're coming from, because that's my job, is to say, okay, well, we want to improve traffic. So every bill that I look at, maybe I'm not going to ask them specifically about each bill, but I know generally what the constituency wants.
Yeah.
That's very useful. I send out a community survey every year. I got one answer back, and most people love it. I got one answer back that said, "Why do I have to help you do your job?"
Yeah.
And
well,
so,
listen,
okay, well,
it's like a report.
That.
Give me a report card.
Right.
You know, how am I doing? Right.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Let's get specific because I know I want it's in the next 40 minutes cover as many things as we can. The ones that are the two sweethearts right now are this apparent turnaround in the marijuana dispensary bill. It looked like, for all intents and purposes, that it was gone, but it's come back.
Yeah, it did. I'm on that conference committee, so I sort of watched it die on Friday, and I had actually worked hard to try to get a bill that I thought would solve problems that we have because we don't have access to medical marijuana. We're going on 16
Well, I was going to say 15 plus years.
Yeah,
right?
not having access, but having allowed it. So that's what, and a lot of people are doing illegal things because
sure.
They need the medicine.
One of your constituents specifically that needed the marijuana oil, right?
For her daughter,
right.
yeah. And so I was hoping we could get to some sort of compromise that would make sure that the public's interest and public safety is taken care of, that we're not creating a program that's going to grow into retail markets. But, I think on late in the afternoon Friday, we realized that the House and the Senate just weren't going to agree. And the Senate was trying to make changes that I honestly thought weren't in the best interest of the public. And that's how I think the House felt, too. And they insisted on a couple of things, specifically Senator Green insisted on a few things that I thought just weren't a good idea.
Beth, one of the concerns that my listeners seem to have, I don't know if this holds true across the country, but there is a relaxation of standards with regards to this nationwide. And that we now look like being influenced here by, well, listen, if they're doing it all over there, it must mean it's okay.
Right. Well, I think that's very true about legalized marijuana in general.
Okay.
Medical marijuana is legal in a lot of different states, has been, so have dispensaries. A lot of states operate dispensary systems that haven't turned into full-blown legalization like a Colorado or a Washington. And I think those are the states we need to be looking at, people that have very well-modified programs that are medical only and have stayed medical only.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're right, we fall into this trap.
Well, most of my listeners seem to feel, hey, look, we understand the need for this and approve of it, but why so many? And why monetize it?
Agreed. And
it seems to me now, if you got a lot of money and you want to open up a woo-woo shop,
right.
Get in line.
Right.
First come, first served.
Well, and that was one of the
big issue, right?
Biggest issues, and that's actually ultimately what caused the House to walk away from the table, is because Senator Green was insisting on first come, first served.
It seems to me that would leave wiggle room for an insider or somebody to jerk the system. I mean, do you look at it? Are we supposed to look at this like a L&L drive-in franchise? I mean, do you get the brand and the thing, and then you have to have the right sort of people working there? You get the license,
right? And I think, and I think the position of the House was that we want a system where the departments can really look carefully at who is trying to create an actual medical program versus who's trying to just create retail shops eventually. What's the best interest of the public? What's actual medicine? And from the House position, we wanted there to be some discretion to be able to determine, instead of it just being whoever stands in line first and has the most money gets.
Yeah, it's so, I've had the input of people saying, wink, wink. It's okay.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is the temptation would be so terrific or huge because of the cost of doing business. I mean, these guys are going to have to pay a lot of money to keep and do that. And there's people are just flat saying, why do we just have, like 6 of them instead of 16 of them? Why is it going to be like Starbucks on every corner?
Right. And it's been pared down from 26.
Right.
Initially, it was a 26 minimum.
Yep.
Now we're looking at 16. I think it's a compromise. I would have liked something around 10. But given that we have a system where we have a bunch of islands and it's hard to get from place to place, that's why. That's the.
You know what though? It's not like running down to the supermarket, get a loaf of bread every couple of days.
No.
You're supposed to be able to have your prescription and get it and have a stock on hand.
Right. We're looking more at something like a a Costco or a Walmart where there are maybe 3 on the island, not a Starbucks. I think that's the danger, is that we turn into the system that we have so many everywhere.
Okay, now since we're talking about smoking marijuana for medical reasons, what about smoking cigarettes? Let's talk about this other one. This is the bill that is going to raise the smoking age to where we would be sort of maybe leading the nation, as some would say, or being a joke.
Right.
So what's not only what are your own personal thoughts, but where is this going, do you think?
I don't know. The reason I voted no on the bill when it passed out of the legislature finally, and the reason why I voted no was specifically because there was a provision in there that said parents are liable for their students or for their children if they've been caught smoking under 21, which means in that 18 to 21-year-old gap, you're as a parent, my kid is emancipated, but I can still be held responsible for them.
Here's the angle that I got, and I'm not sure that listeners would agree or not, and we love your input. By the way, I'm getting a lot of email, but we don't accept email. The question that I asked was an email question, was not political in nature, so it didn't matter. And if you have one of those, we can probably get at it. But most of the people seem to think that, when they were kids, and I remember this when I was a kid, if mom said don't do something, then naturally you did it. I mean, it was just a natural, and same thing with, or do this, then you wouldn't.
Right.
So I'm thinking, and most of my listeners are thinking, is an 18-year-old kid that wants to smoke before they're 21 is going to smoke.
Right.
But it may be saving some. So, I mean, what's the win here? If we do increase this to 21, what do we really expect to win?
I think increasing it to 21 is saying we do think this is dangerous. We think it's as dangerous as alcohol, and let's just say 21 is the standard. I don't know if it's going to help as much as people seem to think it's going to. I think you're right. I think one of the other problems with it is if people that move here from out of state and are maybe 18 out of state, particularly if you're in the military.
What if you're a tourist?
Or if you're a
you can
tourist
walk down the
and
street
you
and
just
you're
can't
smoking.
smoke for
okay,
a
now
couple
what
weeks.
about there are some that are concerned, and I need to ask you this part because 2 people asked me Friday when we get together with you today to talk about the coupling of the vaping part of it to this.
Right.
That the jury is still out as to the real dangers of vaping.
Right.
I particularly think science is going to show down the road this is not good for you either.
Sure.
But right now there doesn't seem to be a bunch of studies around to support that.
No, there aren't, and without that, that's what made it controversial in the legislature. We weren't sure. The science isn't there yet, but a lot of people, and we've heard from a lot of constituents who said, no, just ban it. I don't understand why I can be walking through Pro Ridge or whatever in an indoor space and get smoke being blown at me.
It is. They say there's no harm in it and all that. I tell you, I thought a car in front of us was on fire the other day. It was just coming out of the whole car. And it seems to me, I don't know if it's just me dreaming, you guys out there and gals out there can contribute to this after the news. It seems to me that some of these folks do it as a show-off thing. I mean, it's the volume of smoke that's coming out of their mouth that says, look at me, I'm vaping, instead of a little quietly on the side. Do you seem to get that?
Yeah.
What happens at the Capitol? There's no smoking anywhere around, but those that do have to go outside.
Yes.
And there still is a crowd of people that do go outside.
Yeah.
And so are they being made to feel like criminals if they're a young kid? And one fast thing before the news. When you say that a parent could be held responsible, I don't get that. What do you mean?
If your kid is caught smoking at 18 or 19, the parent can be fined also.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might say, hey, listen, my kid is 6'3" and is going to beat me up. I can't do that.
Well, and he's 19 and really
he's wearing the uniform.
Right.
And
he's already moved out of the house.
Yeah, and he doesn't live here. And I'm responsible?
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. All right, more craziness coming up right after we give you some crazy news. Beth Fukumoto Chang and I will be back to discuss some really specific bills and what you can do to put your input in today and tomorrow, because otherwise you snooze, you lose. Here's Chaz on time with an update. Good morning.
Mike Buck on AM 690. The Answer.
Okay, roll up your sleeves, legislature, and go to work. This is crunch time, burning the midnight oil. And once Beth Fukumoto Chang leaves us this morning, that's the last chance we actually have to talk about what's in and what's out. Next week, we're going to tell you about what's in, and therefore how you get to the power that be, meaning the governor, to let him know that you like or don't like something. Because remember, the governor is the last place the bill goes. And there are a couple of different things that can happen. And Beth, let's remind everybody what happens. There's going to be a whole bunch of things approved by both the House and the Senate.
Yes.
And they're going to be new laws or new bills. And they get signed off on, and they go up to the governor's desk, and he can do one of three things. He can let it become law without a signature. You can explain what that means. Okay. He can veto it.
Okay.
Or he can sign it.
Yep.
Okay. Signing it means it's a law.
Yes. Signing it means it's a law. So does letting it go without his signature.
Okay. Now, what does sometimes that letting it go without a signature, what does that mean?
It usually means I get why the legislature wants it,
but I don't like it.
I don't like it. Yeah. So you're letting it go, and especially if there's no good reason to veto something, then the governor will often say, all right, this is the legislative sort of prerogative, and let it go.
Okay. So, and the third one is to veto it.
Right.
Now, the veto doesn't mean it's history. It means the veto can be overturned.
Yes.
But it takes almost everybody or something.
Yeah, 2/3.
Okay.
2/3. Yeah.
And is it with this particular administration and balance in the House and the Senate, is it unlikely that any veto would be overturned?
Yeah. There have been a couple of vetoes in the last few years when Governor Abercrombie was the governor and I was elected. We haven't come back for a veto override session yet. So I think, things are always get vetoed, especially because what happens when the governor starts looking at what to veto, he's looking at it from the administrative perspective. Are we going to be able to work this? Maybe the attorney general says there's something unconstitutional about this law, or what. There are different reasons to veto something. Yeah,
and quite often you can explain this because you mentioned that the way this session is, that almost anything that doesn't make it past today and tomorrow is still likely to come back again.
Yes.
Because, I mean, look at today and tomorrow, these bills, they've gone through the ringer. I mean, this not just, these things have all been met on and hearinged on and changed and amended.
Oh, yeah. So many times at this point.
Okay, let's roll into some of them with specific things. We talked a little about smoking. We talked a little bit about things. Let's talk about money for a minute. There's a couple of bills, one of which I guess made it through, and that is to allow the state to enter in negotiations to buy a kind of old building in downtown Honolulu. What's the theory and what's your thought?
Well, when it had first come up, I had said I wanted to see the numbers and to know that it's a good idea. I think the state, if you look at the Kamamalu building, the state has had a number of assets that it's made no use of.
For a long time.
For a long time. And I didn't want to see us get into that type of purchase again. I think Ali'i Place is a different story. We're using a lot of it already. It's housing some functions, but we're renting downtown space too. And I think it does make sense from a state perspective to put some money into purchasing a building that's already built rather than letting the state build it again. Sometimes that's a good idea.
What does geography and location have to do with it? Because to me, that building is right where it needs to be.
Yes.
We're sometimes talking about decentralizing government, and there are a lot of people that worry about the second city and whether or not the city is going to be split up. Wouldn't that sort of cement that the state would be sort of maintaining its core in downtown Honolulu?
Yeah, and I think, I wish that some state departments would move out to Kapolei. I don't know when that's going to happen. There are some that maybe don't all need to be packed together, but some of them really do need to be close by. Okay,
let's talk about money, because I do know that one of the hardest pills to swallow is for any legislature to increase fees and taxes, because that's kind of what the voters don't want.
Right.
It looks to me as though the government has embraced a number of things that will put up, if not the GE tax, other taxes and other problems, and particularly with regards to transport. What you thinking on the way the state is getting hands-on with the HART project?
Well, I think What I appreciated about the bill that did come out, it's a 0.5% for 5 years. It wasn't this 25-year extension that the mayor or Hart wanted. I think 5 years is a good amount of time to say, okay, well, we recognize as a state that the rail project is not going to end, and that the city will raise property taxes. Or unless we do this, they're not going to stop it. So as a state, we said, all right, well, we'll put this money in, but we're giving you only as much as you absolutely need. So you're going to have to make sure
Be wise
that you're,
with your money.
Right, you're wise with your money, and that you have to justify anything else that you come back to us.
You know, last weekend, and these things always happen on the weekend, came the press's attempt to expose maybe some influence peddling that's gone on with regards to these projects. And it seems to me that these are legislators on both sides, that depending on where the money comes from, many people haven't been exactly transparent about why they voted or at least how they could have not voted for somebody that's been so generous to them with regards to contributions.
Yeah, I think anybody that wasn't watching the mayoral race or anybody that was watching the mayoral race should not have been surprised by the level of money. We knew what PRP wanted. They wanted the rail, and the amount of money that got poured into that race. Of course, Mayor Caldwell was going to be pro-rail. I think that once you get elected to office, you need to be more careful about saying, okay, well, somebody gave me a campaign contribution, but I know who I represent. It's not my donors. And I think, you know, from my perspective, I try to always do that.
Well, you know, let me ask you this, because I think that there's no question that the mayor is convinced that the city and county of Honolulu needs this project.
Yes.
And most everybody is talking about transit-oriented development. Here lies the hook. The state's come up and said, okay, you know, if we're going to help shepherd this, we want something. And that means we want airspace, we want advertising, we want some other things, which means almost as though the state was going to embrace this project and say, okay, it's not just county, it's also a state project.
I think, you know, the state said it wants the airspace. I don't know if that's because the state is going to want to advertise or if we don't want the city to do it. That's entirely possible. But yeah, this is sort of in a very strange space where everybody kind of had to get involved with this project. It's so big.
There's another thing that is of concern to many. There is still a really strong faction of real anti-rail guys and gals that are trying to come up with maglev and a whole bunch of other things, and are making probably a lot of delays take place because of suits and countersuits and things that they say they can able to document. How influenced is the legislature on that particular group, which seems to be pretty strong in some areas? As far as vetting, as far as saying, wait a minute, do we really have to have steel on steel? Is it too late?
Right. I think it's too far. Maglev as an option came and went a really long time ago. I think I agree that it's not the right technology anyway, even if we could go back. But that said, it doesn't matter. It's done. I do know that there's any amount of concern about the technology, and they're saying, well, this is dated. The companies that made the cars have had financial problems, bonded, licensed, and insured. Who's going to pick up the pieces if one of those big suppliers goes out? Right. There are a lot of rail-on-rail system, steel-on-steel rail systems that are still being built. So I don't think that's true. I think it'll be okay.
Do you buy into the fact that whether or not we like it or not, it's coming, and what can bail it out later, if anything, would be the transit-oriented development that we've been promised?
Bail it out. I don't know if the transit-oriented development bails it out so much as it provides affordable housing. So I think when I look at the rail system, to me, it's a capital improvement project. It's like the highway or anything else. The biggest one we'll ever see in our lifetimes. Huge project, but we need something huge. Otherwise, like I said, affordable housing and that sort of thing, people won't be able to continue to live in Hawaii at the rate. That's a great point, because somebody did point out a couple of days ago on the program, and we should pass that along, is that a lot of people would only be enticed on affordable housing knowing that it was right on top of the transport, which could get them to where they needed to go. Right. Because there are a lot of people that are trying to disconnect with automobiles. Right. And we so desperately need more inventory so people, like myself and people my age can purchase, even if it's not affordable, even middle-class housing. Right. But
grandma and grandpa would roll over in their graves to find out that low price housing is $400,000.
Oh, absolutely.
They'd be what?
Absolutely. But if we don't do something like build a rail or something like that, we're going to have to continue to take up ag land. Right.
We got more coming up, including your opportunity, but quickly at 296-KHNR or 296-5467. I've got a few more minutes to talk about some more bills. There's so many of them. We don't have time to talk about them all, but you better find out about the ones that interest you, because day after tomorrow is way too late.
This is Mike Buck on AM 690, The Answer.
Yep, what you gonna do? What you gonna do? Well, listen, you only have today and tomorrow as a last gasp effort to let your legislators know what you think of certain pieces of legislation. We've only touched on the sort of the hot button issues, but there are lots more of them. And I know that Beth Fukumoto Chang has a few favorites to talk about, and I do as well. We've talked a little bit about the smoking age 21 bill. We talked a little bit about the medical marijuana, about the picking up of a downtown building, spending $90 million on purchasing a building instead of paying rent. And we talked a little bit about the huggy-kissy relationship that seems to be going on now between the city and the state with regards to the HART project or the rail project. But I think further, Beth, maybe you talk about something that got rekindled, and that was the county's ability to take a look at the GET tax too. Lots of people looking at the GE tax now.
Yes.
Again.
Yes.
So what? In a nutshell, what are the counties looking at? What is that bill looking at?
Not every county is going to want to. It's the same bill, the rail bill, and it allows counties other than Oahu to utilize the GET
for transportation only? Okay.
So I think some places, might need another access road or that sort of thing. So that might be what it's used for. But I suspect what it would take is a council vote. I suspect that some counties like Maui County probably will never vote for that. But some of the other counties might take advantage of it.
But, there is a thing, and when we talk about, we never say outer islands anymore,
right,
just to be, politically correct.
Right.
But I think that the neighbor islands have got to understand that a lot of their projects are only made possible because of the amount of people living on Oahu. Yes. I mean, when they get a hotel and when they get a highway or a park, a state park or something, right, it may be not justifiable out of the income taxes paid by the residents of, say, Maui County, right, without help from Oahu, and vice versa, right?
Right. And I think that's true. I think Maui County does produce some revenues in tourism, so that pays for some of it. But what's potentially nice about this GET is that the 0.5% will only be collected from Maui people,
right,
and to use for Maui project. And the states' rights person in me likes the idea of decentralizing even state government to a county level.
Yeah, and there's any number of reasons why some of the counties are looking at what are they going to be contributing eventually to some magical cable that's going to come from Maui or the Big Island to Oahu for electricity or for power?
I don't think so. I think that cable in particular, we stripped a lot of the language out of the law to allow it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that, but what about some of the maybe less glamorous bills? Some of the things that you're working about that really needs people to be aware that it's crunch time.
At this point, I think the most important thing to be aware of is the medical marijuana dispensaries. I think I don't like the process. I don't like that we're bringing it back after it was supposed to be dead. That's not, as I said, I've been an advocate for some form of a dispensary, but I don't like the process by which this is coming.
Do you think, Beth, that maybe it should have gone back to the drawing board and come up again next year with modifications to make more people happy?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay, what about, here, the other big thing is, and I do know that there's educational things to worry about and a lot of other things to worry about, but what about, there's a lot of people on Oahu anyway that are very concerned that HART has said, hey, look, you better go with this GET thing because otherwise your property taxes are going up. Yeah. How can they link one with another?
Essentially what the mayor and the council can do is it's their project, right? The rail is the council project. The state can give them the option to raise money via GET, but if the state did not give them that option, then their only other option would have been property taxes. Or gas taxes.
You know, the thing is, we're all looking at the legislation to limit out this increase for 5 years.
Yeah.
But when property taxes get adjusted, it doesn't seem that there would be much of a provision to say, okay, it's only going to go up for a little while till we need it.
No, yeah.
Up is up.
No, up is up.
Yeah.
And I suspect the city will at some point look to raise property taxes. Yeah.
Is it, in my opinion, I don't know about yours, but in my opinion, it shows the lack of ability of leadership to keep a spending cap without increasing the cost of living to us.
Right.
Okay, in the few minutes that we have left, what about some other things that you think? First of all, I do know that there's a big concern in the budget and with union contracts.
Yeah.
The HSTA and UPW, where are we and with regards to some of that in the budget part of the bill?
We're actually voting on most of those today also. I think most of the agreements have been made and the legislature is ready to make those appropriations. We don't have a ton of control over what agreements are made just because it's a managerial thing that the governor works on, but they seem to have reached their agreement. So we have to go ahead and vote on those things now.
And that's happening too. By the way, if you're on the phone, we got a lot of people in the control room and Rafi didn't see it ringing. So those of you that were ringing, would you ring back in? 296-KHNR, that's 296-5467. You only got a couple of minutes to do that. I also want you to know in these couple of minutes how important it is for you to do the input you do. It's a lot easier, Beth.
Yeah.
For instance, if somebody in your constituency wants to comment, what's the best? What do you recommend?
Email is the quickest for us. We always get our emails.
Does email create a better record than a phone call?
Yes.
Yeah, because the phone call, depending on how busy somebody in the office is going to get maybe less attention.
Right, particularly in these next few days, if a person calls and wants to talk to me directly.
Yeah, that's pretty tough.
I might not get to you until Wednesday after we vote.
You know, a bunch of people want to know what's the alternative with regards to coming back in. Isn't it way too early to know if there's going to be any sort of a special session or anything?
Yeah, I don't think it would have to take a huge veto for us to come back. I don't think that we will.
Let's get you to put your headset on there and let's go. This is an interesting one. We've talked earlier in the session with our friend Don in Kaneohe, who has a specific interest in some bills that have to do with those that are visually impaired. Don, good morning.
Thank you for taking my call. But
sure, what do you got?
Mike, it's not for vision impaired, but I'm concerned about the ethanol bill. What is your vote going to be? Can you tell why and what is the reason why the ethanol is going to be?
Yeah, that's a good way to end up, Don. And thank you very much for that. In the time that we have left, I do know that they're saying that the ethanol thing was a failure, that it's costed a lot of money, that we haven't grown it here, and yet it looks like it's going to go away. Is it, do you think?
Yeah, ethanol was supposed to be a locally produced fuel, and it never happened.
Was there anybody ever that was really serious about it?
I think we thought that they might be.
Yeah.
I think it was a effort by the legislature to try to get some fuel locally produced, which makes a lot of sense, but it hasn't happened. We've studied it. The legislature has done studies about it, and it's something that just isn't working out the way we thought it would.
An interesting comment was that cars are getting better mileage than they used to be.
Yes.
That there are a lot of hybrids now, that the ethanol thing looked like a fix at a time before there were other fixes being done. Has it been beaten?
I think, yes.
Yeah,
yes, it has. So what we're doing this year is repealing the ethanol requirement, and I'm probably going to vote yes on that. I think that's a good idea.
That being said, how quick would it be? I mean, would it be January?
I don't remember the exact date.
Because I'm thinking that right now, I heard something in California, there was these summer blends or whatever they call it, where you did more of this and more of that. And yet everybody here is saying, look, we are importing this.
Yes.
That causes a problem.
Yeah.
And whatever it was going to achieve, obviously it didn't.
Yeah, and I think it's an optional. We're repealing the requirement for ethanol, so somebody could still use ethanol.
Sure,
they probably won't, but they could.
There are some that say, look, the state was never really inclusionary for involvement or investment in this. They didn't give incentives for people to grow ethanol, to grow stuff that would turn into ethanol.
And you know what? We actually did give incentives. People just didn't want to use them. We did have a number of tax credits, and it just wasn't working out. Yeah.
Well, I know that for the next couple of days you're going to be busy. And next Monday we'll know what kind of input there was and what made it, what didn't. Right?
Yep.
Thanks, Beth.
Yep. Thank you.